When I was a young man, I was cursed. This is how I survived. When I was a young man, I was cursed. I don't know how or by who. I don't know if it was by accident or deliberately an attempt to ruin my life. At this point, I doubt I will ever know. I don't know which one would be worse, and then I guess it doesn't matter. I'm 76 now, and I was born in a mid-sized town in a mid-sized country into a mid-sized family. I was a good kid, as good as anyone else, I guess. People weren't as good then as they say they are now, though I can hardly see that as being my fault. But sometimes I wonder if I did some harm to someone badly enough for them to curse me, if I was the villain in someone's story. But I don't know what that something or who that someone could have been. I did all my schoolwork, I played basketball, hung out with my friends, the normal stuff. But when I was 17, something changed. Something sinister entered my life. I kept thinking back to that time and if there was something I missed, something I'd done or someone had done unto me. But as it's often the case, the roots were buried somewhere underneath, out of sight, just under our footsteps, never in front of us. I began to see shadows where there were none. Sometimes they were in the windows, blocking the sunlight like a oblong fog. Other times they rose up into the dark and thin creatures in the distance, like sprouting trees. Those same shadows started to invade my dreams, and I'd wake up in a cold sweat, with my hands in taut fists. The fingernails dig deep into my palms. And when I couldn't sleep, or something outright refused to, they began to walk on our rooftops. I'd hear their footsteps up and down, over and over, like they were playing hide and seek. I wondered how shadows could make footsteps. Often I wrapped a pillow around my head to drown them out, but the tighter I pulled the pillow, the harder they stomped. My parents nor my siblings ever heard a peep. After a while, I entered a state of constant drownness, which quickly reflected on my day-to-day life. I couldn't reconcile with my school. I wasn't passing. As I slept through all my classes, their noisy classrooms were busy enough to grant me some peace from those things. They couldn't do much in big crowds. Those were the only times when I could sleep peacefully, have a break. Soon I didn't have the energy to play sports or hang out with my friends anymore. My friends, along with my parents, asked me questions I had no answer. Had I started taking drugs, hanging out with the wrong people, gotten some illness? Funnily enough, nowadays I feel like my symptoms pointed to depression, but in those days the word was used purely to erotic context. Nowadays it's easier to talk about such things, but back then, there's no way. I'd be sent to a Louis bin in a quick second, and a pad asylum room sounded like a death trap. Perhaps I would have been in a very utterly state. As often as I'd sneak out of the house at night and try to get into the local bars, seeing as they were defended, or at least somewhat encapsulated by large groupings of people, in accent bars were the only places during the night which granted me the veil of protection. Sometimes I got in, oftentimes not. If they shooed me away, it was a big and anxious walk back home. They'd gotten closer and closer, more familiar, more brave. I saw them climb through the fences and up by the roofs. of buildings just staring at me. Sometimes I ran home, but there was one bar that let me in pretty much every time. It was quite a long walk away, but the owner, Andy, was a good guy. The first time I went there, as I went to order a beer, I could see that he was about to tell me to take a hike. I never looked old for my age, but when he looked at me, I mean, really looked at me, something in his mannerism seemed to change. Maybe it was the bags under my eyes or the defeated posture I held, but I like to think that Andy thought that whatever I'd go back to would be worse than in the bar. So Andy let me stay. The establishment itself was, I guess, what you would call a dine bar. To get into the steam basement, you had to walk down these uneven concrete steps that also functioned as a impermanent outdoor aura, giving them a constant wet, aroma, mineral quality. All the windows were small and high up the walls, showing a cubicide view of people's feet as they walked past. Inside the bar itself, lectured in choice of drinks, and around the room were a round of wooden tables and a tray of different kinds of chairs, no two of which were exactly the same. In its own way, it was kind of cozy. I couldn't always make the trip. The walk was too long, and filled was too many shadows. But I tried as often as I could, but every time I did go, Andy would save me a seat. It was quiet usually during the early evenings or late night. We'd get to talking, just small talk about something funny that happened around the bar or how the weather was looking. It was nice to get to do just normal things and to feel some connection and humanity again. After a few weeks, I developed a new routine. I'd sleep at school and I'd head over to Andy's as quick as I could before the dark set in. Andy wouldn't serve me alcohol, but he went through the trouble of giving me apple juice and whiskey glass to give the right appearance, I guess. I stayed even after Andy kicked everyone else out. I helped him clean up. We'd walk out together, but once he was out of view, heading to his place on the other side of town, I sprint back home. When the streets were empty and the lights were low, I'd hear them whispering from the alleyways and under broken streetlights. I could see their elongated forms taking shape, but I never looked long enough to see their full form. Somehow I knew if I did, that'd be it. My end. I stared, bringing some of my school books in to do some homework so I wouldn't fail my classes. Even with the flux whiskey, I looked out of place, but no one ever gave me trouble. I think Andy had something to do with that. One night, me and Andy were talking, and he said he had something important to tell me. He never had anything important to say, which was a trait that he served well as a bartender. I was sure he was going to tell me I was no longer welcomed, that it wasn't good for him to host some stray kid every night. But the truth was much worse. Donnie, listen, he began. His voice entered devolve, and his regular bartender drove his. I'm moving. Moving? Where? I asked, hoping that he would simply meant that he was moving apartments and maybe he needed to go closer or start charging more. Or maybe he found a new bar somewhere closer to me, perhaps, or something. Connecticut. I'm leaving. I couldn't believe it. Or I could, but I knew that without Andy and his bar, I'd be shit out of luck. I needed this place. It was the only thing keeping me safe, and although I wished Andy nothing but the best, what came out of my mouth was, "You can't leave."